Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today's episode is focusing on what precautions you should take against a guardless opponent. That means somebody, maybe not to the extreme extent that we saw McGregor put his hands behind his back when he was fighting Alvarez, but maybe somebody who lets their hands dangle, maybe somebody whose hands are way out here, somebody who's not protecting themselves with that classic guard. What do you have to be aware of? What are the major threats? And how do you go about defeating them? What sort of tactics can you use to land shots but not get hit? First off, I want to say thank you to the subscriber who put this request in. I have to apologize though, because this request was from a while ago. The guy said he was prepping up to fight a guardless opponent. I hope that fight went well, and I apologize for not getting this episode out sooner. I just want everybody to understand, because I'm really trying to keep on top of things, but it's getting so busy. When the channel first started, I was literally getting back to every comment on the channel. Then we went from 20,000 subscribers up to 80, just like bam, bam, bam. And all of a sudden I was sitting in front of the computer for an hour a day responding to comments, and I was only getting through like 25%. Now I realize my time is better spent in other areas, so I get back to a few comments. I take note of all your requests. I have this list that is enormous. I'm trying to get through them, and I try to respond to the Instagram comments or the ones that come in over social media. Again, it's getting a little overwhelming. Some days getting 10 to 30 messages, people asking for tips on things. So a little bit slow on this episode, but I'm doing the best I can. Now, moving back into the content for today, what we need to understand about guardless opponents is because they're not classically protecting their head, they're going to have other strengths. And these other strengths are very dangerous. So the first thing that we need to recognize when we're fighting somebody with this style is they are very good at movement with their feet. They don't just stand there. They're not like me where they stand square in front of somebody and they just end up in pocket exchanges. These guys are mobile. They're moving. They're bouncing. They're making life very difficult for you to land shots when you want. And this is smart on their part. If they want to get in, they explode in, they throw their shots, but then they're gone. And they're very elusive, evasive, and sometimes people who are fighting them might even say they're running. They're not really fighting, they're just running. But I don't think they are. I think they're just doing smart, technical tactics. So that is the first thing to be aware of. And remember, at the end of the episode, I will go through how we're going to defeat these guys. But right now, we're just talking about things you need to understand about the guardless fighter. The next thing is their head movement is usually very, very good, especially at just pulling away. That little tip back is going to be very frustrating when you're trying to throw. You think you're going to land, and then all of a sudden between the footwork or the head movement, they're out of range. But in addition, when you start trying to throw your combos, their head can usually drop very far to the side and they become increasingly difficult to land on. Next up, you need to recognize that these fighters like range fighting. They do not like being tight. The tighter you are with your guard down low, the more chance you're going to have of getting clipped, because you're constantly trying to move your head or move your feet. These guys like the distance, and you have to recognize that when you're coming in against a guardless opponent, these guys are going to be at length, and it's going to be up to you to figure out how to close that distance safely. Because in my experience, the guardless fighters are exceptional at countering. It's almost like if you're not good at countering, this style will not work for you. But if your hands are down and you're moving and the guy comes and throws and you can slip and tag him back, or move your head and tag him, if you can do something like that, you almost have that necessity of guardless fighting covered. So be very aware of that fact. Again, we'll touch on what to do against this predicament, I'm going to say, in a little bit. Now, the next thing in regards to them moving a lot is they're often very hard to corner, especially if you're fighting in an octagon or something which doesn't have the classic corner of a ring. But even a lot of these fighters, they're very hard to get to the corner and keep them there. And because that fact, And because it's so difficult, you have to have down a very good game plan on how you're going to land on this person if you're not able to get them in the corner. And the final predicament that I see very often, the thing that you should be aware of for these guardless fighters, is it's very difficult to land single shots. When it's difficult to land single shots, that's either because of their head movement, their footwork, whatever little factors, but it makes it that difficult sort of fight where now you go, okay, I have to set everything up, I have to fake, I have to throw combos. You're not getting away with those single shots because generally you're just hitting air. These are all the main precautions, the things that you need to have in your head when you're fighting somebody who does not have that classic guard hands right to your head. Now let's talk about how we're going to go about defeating somebody if they're doing all the things I talked about. What tactics can you use to try and make life difficult for them? Because remember, hands down is a disadvantage in some aspects for sure, and you need to be very good at everything I just mentioned. If you're not very good at all those, then the hands down is just a way to get KO'd very fast. So first, let's address those counters. We talked about them being very good at pulling out and hitting back, or just whatever they're doing. You have to be ultra aware that when you step in and you throw, everything is crazy snug. No openings, no coming and dropping your hand, because most likely this will miss and then you're going to get countered. Your goal is to go, okay, if I throw one and then they slip to the side and they come and counter here, then I follow up after their counter. And I try to take advantage of the fact that we are no longer at that long range. Once we've got to that close range, it's your time to shine. It's your time to put the work in. And remember, if they're fighting at range and they're being crazy elusive, they're all over the place, they're bouncing, they're moving, you're going, I can't get this guy in a position I want, do not let up. If you let up and you let the fight happen at their range, you're kind of like, okay, I'm just going to stand here. He darts in, he hits you, he darts out. If that's the fight, it's done. You either need to take a big step back, and once you're here and this guy's going, okay, I want to try and jump into him, you take another step back, you make the guy overcommit, and then you start slamming in your counters, or you make sure you fake first. Once they move, you go, okay, there's no point in following up. You fake again, they move, and then you start faking and they're going to go, maybe I'm putting in too much movement. Then when they start to get tired of taking that step to your fake, then you start faking and following up with the additional attack. And remember that if these guys are dropping their head, the further you drop your head, the more difficult it is for some shots to land, but the easier it is for other shots to land. So things you want to work when you're dealing with somebody who's really good at slipping backwards or dropping to the side with excessive movement is you want to set up a shot and then anticipate which direction they're going to go. They're probably going to drop that way. So when I throw this, I come right to that. And it can't be that classic 1, 2, 3 pace. It's not 1, 2, it's boom, boom. You know they're going to fall there, so this is completely a setup. Same thing for the lengthy round kick. If they lean back, when you throw the cross, they lean, well, boom, because the round kick is longer than the cross. So a lot of times you are trying to think ahead, recognize that your first shot is going to miss, but they might move right in to your second shot. You've got to be clever. And you can't just let them fight their fight, use all that brain power they're employing with all their fancy guardless techniques, and just be like a barbarian just charging forward. You've got to think as well. Now we talked about single shots often missing. We talked about the fake. That's a good way to start off. I fake, and then once I get in, I start unloading my shots. And remember that even if they're very good at slipping, the body does not slip when the head moves. The body's still there. The legs are still under you. So you attack the lower part of the body and the legs to make sure that you at least get a couple shots to land. When I fought Lerdsila, who is crazy at this guardless fighting style, we went, if I throw 1 or 2 punches to the head, he's going to miss, or I'm going to miss. All of them. Like everything's just going to hit air. But if I start going 1, 2 body, and then I chop his leg because he went from 1, 2, you hit him, and then he's kind of going, oh shoot, body shot, okay, I have to adjust, then you chop the leg, things will land. So being smart and employing those sort of tactics will help you beat these guardless opponents. And that is everything I wanted to talk about today. We have the precautions, what you need to recognize in these guardless fighters, why they're so good and frustrating, but then we have what you can do to defeat them. What are you going to go about employing to make sure you break down their style? And remember, very often these guardless fighters will eventually make a big mistake, lean the wrong direction, overcommit, and they get knocked out. That is the big problem with the guardless style, in my opinion. Eventually, the knockout is going to come. Right? You might win a fight, you might win a fight, you might win a fight, but a lot of times you end up getting hit and you end up going out. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, like you shouldn't try this style. If this style works for you, that's great. But anybody who's trying to employ the guardless style, make sure you're also very good in here. Because what happens if you lean, you get cracked, and then all of a sudden you're going, oh, I've never really blocked shots in this position because I'm always worried about evading like this. If you're dummied, and you have your hands down and then you're trying to employ these guardless tactics, that's going to be terrible. So guardless fighters out there, people who like to play around with their hands down, yes, get good at this, but also get good at this as your backup strategy. And that is everything I want to talk with you guys about today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it a like. If you have not already, join the channel and get subscribed. As always, train hard. I'll see you back here soon for another episode.